helping people to tap into their own power to influence both their own immediate world, but to influence the wider world. And then they can go on to then influence their world because of the shift that they've gone through. And that has a bigger knock-on impact to the world.
This emergence that comes from hopefully moving more from the mind into the heart within ourselves, forgiveness and compassion for ourselves, for our families and our communities and outwards.
The creative, element and processes that we have, that's where some of us have our power. And I think it's really important to tap into your power, your position, the role that you play out here in, moving and shifting change.
Whatever you already know, whatever small or massive awakenings have touched you in your life, don't go back to sleep.
Hello, dear ones. Welcome to this special episode. It's a live one that we recorded at Noisily Festival. It's our 3rd year running. We had We Are Nature, then We Are Love, and now We Are Change. This will actually be our last episode for now. We have decided as a team to take the rest of the summer off and come back to you in September. When we started this podcast in 2017, we wanted to offer you something weekly, so you knew that you had us in your life, that we were always here for you and consistent. There weren't many podcasts in those days. Things have changed so much since then, with there now being so many podcasts and different types of media. And I know that the people that you need space and nature and quiet. And so instead of making more all the time, we are going to make less and hope that you treasure what we do create and have time to listen back to the archives. We will be tending our inner flames, hanging out with our loved ones, and whispering with the trees over the following weeks. Speaking of change, I am transitioning from using my maiden name for my work. And so you will start to see around Amisha Tala Oak. And that is still me, who you've known as Amisha Gadiali. I will be recording the podcast music with this name after our summer break. It's quite a process evolving a maiden name and changing it everywhere, despite using this name for 20 years for all my work and having published 2 books with it. I know that it's okay to let things go and let life move on and know that anything important will stay connected. Despite our summer break, in the meantime, we are still meeting monthly with Soul Space. And it's wonderful to be with many of you in Reclaim Your Intuition, which you can join and do in your own time. You can find details of this on our events calendar at allthatweare.org. This conversation was recorded at the Mind Stage of Noisily. I had a really wonderful and inspiring collection of guests: Ebyän, Jimena, Darren, and Nathaniel. In the order that you will hear them, they are Ebyän Zanini, a writer, visual storyteller, and poetress of Somali-Italian descent. She is the founder of Mother Tongue and teaches at the intersection of decolonization, eco-sensuality, and feminine mysticism. Ebyän's offerings are deeply inspired by the animist spirituality of her Nubian ancestral heritage, weaving us closer to the enchantment that is available in all life. Mother Tongue has 6 pillars: animist spirituality, creative empowerment, feminine revival, decolonization, ancestral emergence, and ecosystem consciousness. Ebyän shared her powerful live ritual art performance at the festival called On War and Peace. Jimena Paratcha is a mother, social entrepreneur, and Jungian mentor coach. Having established NGOs in the defense of children and young people, Jimena is now focused on the protection of culture, traditions, and territories of Indigenous nations, which in turn protect the forests in which they live. Bridging the connection between Brazil and the British Isles as guardian of the Yawanawa, Kunikwin, and Tucano people, She is co-founder of Medicine Festival and the Akasha Retreat Center in Rio de Janeiro, where she is based and co-creates a nurturing, transformative space. Jimena offers supportive coaching, mentorship, integrating the mission of inner and collective heart-centered emergence called for in these transitional times. Darren is an educator specializing in mycology and psychedelic research and is based in the UK and Jamaica. Known around the world for his shroom shop masterclasses and mushroom educational programs, he is a keen cultivator and teacher. He has been growing gourmet and medicinal mushrooms for over 13 years and has translated his home growing experiences into a social enterprise. His achievements include launching the UK's first accredited mycology and mushroom cultivation course for schools and young people, providing hands-on experience to empower school children and at-risk youth. You may have also got one of his t-shirts that says, "You are a mushroom having a human experience." Nathaniel Dunn is a change maker. He is fascinated by how change inside a person can lead to change in the world. That's what he devoted himself to through his coaching, consulting, speaking, writing, and leadership training. Nathaniel helps people to understand themselves so they can be who they need to be in order to create what they want to create. He brings together the science of psychology, the depth of spirituality, and the creative power of coaching to help create the changes inside a person that become the foundation for wider changes in their world and the world. He works with entrepreneurs, business leaders, and military veterans and is passionate about supporting people who are using business as a force for good. Now I'm going to share with you the words for the theme "We Are Change" that were written by our collaborator and friend Helly Cameron for Mind, Body, Soul. We are change. As the world evolves at pace around us, often in ways that feel out of our integrity and control, we can forget that we are part of this change, that it is our united constant, and that we have agency in creating the present and future we want to be part of. The smallest pebble ripples through a lake. Dandelion seeds release in the breeze to settle far and wide. Mother Nature's reminder of the power we hold in being and creating change. Life offers ever-evolving cycles of opportunity, growth, and connection, sparking love, learnings, unlearnings, and adventure. Rooted in our bodies and within our beautiful Earth's ecosystem. The smallest whispers dance through this web of love and life. Our breath and action give them fire. We are at once accountable for ourselves and part of something so much greater, the infinite spirals of the universe. But are they? Humankind has long reached crisis point on Earth. Toxic, extractive systems and behavior still prevail. It is time to be the change we want to see, to feel and honor the cycles of life we all form part of and perpetuate, to be in our integrity within this incredible living web as interconnected equals rather than hierarchical oppressors. This year at Noisily, we celebrate change, its courage, commitment, gifts, and invitations. We come together in our beautiful, growing community to empower each other, connecting our hearts through music, movement, creativity, ceremony, ritual, discussion, exploration, and so much more. We commit to being open and curious and to sharing these transformative experiences into our outside world, taking ownership of our ripples and calling in our tribes. Together, we reclaim change as a state of being from which all is birthed. We remember our power. We are change. In this episode called The Butterfly Effect, we explore the question, how can we become catalysts for change? Welcome to All That We Are, with me, your host, Amisha Gadiali. On this show, we explore the weave between activism, the sacred, creativity, and regeneration, the spaces where our inner and outer worlds dance. From healing trauma to nature connection, to new technologies to ancient wisdom, it's time for us to move beyond silos and into an integrated way of being. Every one of us has ideas and personal experiences to share that can lead us to a more beautiful future. Despite the challenges we face as a global community or the pressures we meet in our daily lives, when we stop and dare to listen, to ask ourselves the big questions, and to share what we are already doing and envisioning, we create the futures of our wildest dreams. And we begin to embody all that we are becoming, and all that is possible. Ebyän, I'm going to ask you to start us off and share a little bit around what speaks to you in those words that were shared, and maybe even what's missing from them, and how that connects to what you're seeing right now in your work and in the world.
I'd like to just start by giving thanks to my heritage and ancestry. I'm half Somali, half Italian. The words that Amisha shared remind me of something that I've been sitting with lately in a shift in my life, which is I've spent a long time with a very discerning mind and a very judgmental mind towards this society, modern society, Western society, however we call it, since a young age, and particularly through initiations of awakening. And that was useful for a time to pay attention to what doesn't feel right in a deeper part of my being and my soul. But what I found is that that judgment can sometimes be stretched out too long when I did not take my seat as a culture creator and a co-creator even deeper with the web of life, with evolution, the living intelligence of evolution. And so I'm going to keep my first sharing short and just share with you that intentionality in my life now, which is very difficult, but to refocus myself rather than simply a culture criticizer to a culture co-creator. And I have a friend, a mutual friend actually, Amisha also knows him, Al-Noor Lada, who's an anti-capitalist speaker and mystical anarchist, he calls himself. He has this phrase, if all we have is a critique, we are spiritually impoverished. And if we do not have a critique on modern colonial capitalism, then we are irrelevant to our times. And so this balance of being able to see and look and pay attention to where there is harm and cycles of suffering, and to break that pattern, while at the same time resourcing for a deeper well of both inspiration and mutual upliftment and call forward rather than a bludgeoning. So that's my part for now.
Thank you. Jimena, would you like to share something of an introduction and what's alive for you with these words?
Thank you, Ebyän, for starting us off. And I'd also like to recognize my heritage, Argentinian, Californian. When Amisha invited me to come onto this panel, I was in Brazil. I've been 8 months in Brazil, just arrived on Sunday. And I looked up from there the word change. And in Google, the first thing was the Cambridge Dictionary, and it came up as something that is different. And I've been sitting with that and just felt, like you said, the lack of what was there. It felt like so dry and just direct and lacking of the movement in change. The importance of being with that flow of the movement of change. And then I arrived here on Thursday, and as I arrived to the gates, I found out that a very, very dear friend of my first shamanic teacher had passed in the morning, only age 53. And from the grief that came up straight away and the gratitude for that flow of emotion, as we know, like, or you may not know, that the most toxins that can come out of our bodies, they're through our tears. And so I gave gratitude for that and connected in with him, and then came into the festival and literally thought, gosh, if there's anything else that can represent change the most is that life and death. And he was a festival goer and a festival supporter. And I looked around and thought, here we are, and then we're not. Just the impact of that for me has been really strong as I've been here. And I just feeling that importance of the dropping into that flow of what change is, which is movement, which the more that we can be with that. And here in the British Isles, where, you can call the weather whatever you like, but it's definitely changeable. That is something. In Brazil, people will say to me, my goodness, you're going back to England, it's cold and rainy. And I said, well, not always. It's definitely changeable. And so if we can learn anywhere in the world about how to adapt, it would be here. We're constantly having to adapt to that change, to that movement. So yeah, thank you.
Darren.
Thank you for the invitation to share on the panel. In all honesty, there was a lot of words. I was trying to do my best to process it all. But what reminded me is, one, action speaks louder than words. And I say that to say that in these days and times, I was taught by my elders, who I give kudos to for allowing me to understand that, especially in the current climate that we're in, we need to also understand that it's part of a cycle. It's a pendulum swing. And we can't always be on the up and up all the time. As much as it might swing into the blissness, it's got to swing back round onto the other polarity. And with that said, I was also taught by one of my wise elders that change wouldn't take place until 99.9% of our backs up are against the wall, because that's how stubborn and rooted we are into our common perspectives. So with that said, we're going to have some challenges that force change and transformation. And change and transformation for myself, again, I was taught by my elders, start from within. So if we start that transformation within, there's a butterfly effect and a knock-on effect. And I always say, because I work a lot with young people, so as much as they might want to blame somebody, like, sir, he done this or she done this to me, and that's why I done what I done, I'm always reminding them, like, well, what can you do? How can you react or respond in a way that affects change for you and not a reactive change? And that's a perspective that I feel what we carry into adulthood, and we're still out here pointing finger at, like, the ops, as the young people that I work with say, they're the ops. But if we make that change within and change our perspective, we can shift things. So just to piggyback off the sister as well, just as far as like changing the weather. I put up a slide earlier on in my presentation where I made reference to the Hopi and the Dogon, who, if they wasn't happy with the weather, they would change the weather. But they do that through changing and shifting the cells within inside of themselves, because they know that they are connected to the weather. They shift through dance and through movement and so forth. And these are some of the perspectives that I think we need to bring into our conversation as far as what are the actions that we're meant to be doing in this current time. So if we are in Armageddon, if it is the end of the world, if it is Kali Yuga, we need to embrace the part or the cycle that we are in, and rather than try to change the narrative that doesn't fit because, we're in this bubble, I feel the change and transformation starts with you, then the butterfly effect is your family members, the people in your household, your next door neighbors, the street and the community, and that's how we can kind of make shift and changes in the world. So with that focus within, I feel there's a butterfly effect, and that's what I got from my first download.
Thank you. Nathaniel.
Yeah, for me, it's like mixed emotions, to be honest, hearing that and thinking about it. We are change. Like, some part of me wants to stamp my feet, and the activist part of me like, yes, we are change, because we need change, don't we? I really, really believe that we need change urgently in our world. I see that our system is breaking. We're in the collapse of the current system as I see it. That's scary, and it's uncomfortable. And there's this like resistance to the current structures that are keeping us going in this crazy trajectory that we're on. And so part of me, when I think of We Are Change, wants to be that person, stand up and fight for something different. I love the idea of what you said about creating culture. I think that's such an interesting and empowering way to think of it. And then the other part of me goes, well, it's kind of peaceful and hopeful. Like, change is such a normal thing. Change is happening all the time. The world is changing. It's the way of nature. There's nothing really static in nature. Everything changes. Even within us, it's so mad. It's like, I think apart from some cells in your brainstem, every single cell in your body regenerates at least every 7 years. So there's no part of you that's been around for more than 7 years. It's so crazy. And you think of yourself as this kind of permanent entity, but we're not. Even you're just a constantly changing organism. You're just this symbiotic relationship between all these different parts of you that makes you you. And that's how nature works. Change is happening all the time. And I think we lost our way a little bit and we got disconnected from that. And actually, if we allow ourselves to come back to that and see that and go with it and allow it, all of a sudden change doesn't really seem so scary anymore. And actually, I see that it can be soft and gentle, and it might still be quite uncomfortable given all the big changes that need to happen, but that's okay. That's just the way things go. So for me, it's a little bit mixed. I'm a bit like energized by it and softened by it at the same time.
Thank you. The talk about the weather, last weekend I was at a ceremony that a few of us were having, and it was rainy. It was forecast to be rainy, and a few people went and sat and really, really focused on doing a ritual to invite in the sun. And then a rainbow appeared, and then we had like this beautifully sunny day. And it was so beautiful to see that that we have that within us if we're able to tune into it. Having been in this space for 20 years now of social change and spiritual transformation and whatever different words and languages that kind of come terms around this notion of really bringing intentionality into change in trying to create a more beautiful future, that there's been lots of different kind of waves of it. There's like the be the change you wish to see in the world, and then there's the everything's kind of changing and nature is evolving and it's all just part of a natural cycle, and be present to what's happening. And then there's we have to break down the big structures of power, and actually the individual doesn't make that much difference. There's kind of all these different ways of looking at it, and there's often arguments over which way is right. And I'm not interested in knowing which way is right, but I would love to know from everyone here, how you sit within all of that and how you hold that dynamic tension that we have around the ways in which we have power and the ways in which we're powerless.
Thank you, Amisha. From quite a young age, my mission was to collect teenagers from high school and convince them in California that we were definitely needed in other places rather than high school in the United States of America. And so we would go to all these different marches and campaign to free Nelson Mandela, for abortion rights. And actually, Jesse Jackson, I don't know if you remember him, but there was a moment he was speaking at 10 in the morning on a Thursday, and a friend of mine said, come on, let's go and support him. And I was like, it's a Thursday, it's school day. And that was the first time. She's like, where do you think we're needed most? At high school or supporting Jesse Jackson, who was like a Martin Luther King kind of for that time. But yeah, so I was really strongly into political activism, and then worked with social justice, defending the rights of children and young people in Brazil with an NGO here in London, and ended up in environmental social justice work. And I've gently removed myself a bit, and I've been working now in Brazil supporting the rights of indigenous people of the Amazon and their territories, and to keep the trees standing. But it's felt sometimes a little bit of I've felt guilty about not being more strongly in the movement. So I've had to address that with myself and understand for myself that it's a different time in my life. But also, when you ask, how do we manage that? I feel that I've actually done a bit of push and pull is what I felt. And so there's sometimes I can push a bit more, and there's sometimes where I give space for receiving. A quote came up as you were speaking, good old Charles Darwin and his theory of survival of the fittest, which really impacted me quite young age, which says that it's not the strongest, it's the most adaptable to change that will survive. And in his theory and in his studies of nature, that's what he found. And so actually for me, it's become more a priority and a mission in my spiritual transformational life, in my work life, to be open and receptive to watching the signs and to adapt to what is more alive in the current of life. Thanks.
Yeah, I can speak to that. I don't think there is a right or wrong answer, like you said, and I don't think that's really a helpful question either. There's lots of different ways to create and influence change, and there's lots of different changes that are needed, and there are lots of different aspects of change that are already happening, from top down political systemic change, from bottom up spiritual awareness, and the much more deeper consciousness that seems to be emerging certainly in the modern Western cultures anyway. So I don't see that there's a right or a wrong answer really, but I see that we all have our part to play in it. You get to choose what that is, actually. And a huge part of my work in helping people as a coach is really helping people to tap into their own power to influence both their own immediate world, but to influence the wider world. You never know really what it is that's going to be the catalyst for that. Sometimes it's just a tiny shift in perspective, or just a realization, an insight that someone has that can be just a glimpse of something that they see differently, but then their whole world changes after that. And then they can go on to then influence their world because of the shift that they've gone through. And that has a bigger knock-on impact to the world. So I see that we can think about like these big changes that need to happen, and it can be really scary, and it can feel like we're completely disempowered, and it can feel like, oh, it's too big, it's too hard, it's not my thing, I don't understand that world. And we can feel like we don't have any influence. But actually I see it the other way is true. Sometimes the tiny little things can have a huge knock-on impact. And the moment someone sees that for themselves and starts to actually embody that and to show up to create whatever change is important for them, when other people see that and other people feel that, it influences them. It gives them permission to do that too. So I see that actually we've got huge power here. We've got way more power than we think we have. And it might just be in what seems to you like a small, maybe, in your immediate circle, but that change is just as important. It's all part of the change.
And I'll just piggyback off that, because basically my thoughts are pretty much the same. I've got a saying that I heard from a rapper back in the days, and it was getting where you fit in. And I use the same principles with the young people that I work with, in the sense of like, everybody can't be a striker. When it comes to, I use the football metaphor. And, we need goalkeepers, right backs, left back. Everybody needs to play their position. And there isn't no one way of doing this. So if you are somebody who needs to go out, march, vote, protest, from that perspective, like, go for it. I've spent a lot of time in the last few months in Jamaica. And in all honesty, they've been chanting down Babylon for a long time. This is what they've been doing. Like, it's not a new thing. It's not because of this. We've been in this season for a long time. But cool, some people are aware of this cycle that we're in. And so with that said, there's the way they do it, physically chanting with the mouth, with the drum. There's just different ways we can do this. And I feel like if one of those positions that people play is like to paint, like, I think that is the creative, element and processes that we have. That's where some of us have our power. And I think it's really important to tap into your power, your position, your, the role that you play out here in, moving and shifting change, and not feeling like, I didn't go out and march, so I'm not doing the right thing. Or somebody saying, you didn't do this, so you're not really for the cause. I don't see you posting enough on the internet, so because you're not doing that, you're not, for the cause. And I don't believe that's the best way to go about it personally. But yeah, we all have to find where we feel empowered to make our shift and change.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's a very pertinent point that, we're an ecosystem, and an ecosystem has different roles and different nutrients that we bring to the forest. And if we all try to be purple tulips or an oak, then we have monoculture, and that's not the purpose of life, really. There's a magic and a beauty in diversity, and our diverse gifts are also what's going to bring about change. There's a saying in Africa that says when the people come together, they can even mend a crack in the sky. So I find in this phrase, we hear also the importance of unity. And so with the point that Darren brought up, which I very much agree with, it's going to take all of us pushing at this thing from all sides to give birth to some form of a more than a new earth, a new humanity here on earth, you know? And at the same time, it will require a unification because actually a friend of mine, Angela, showed me this beautiful image of like, imagine a giant shark that's like chasing a bunch of little minions being like, I'm going to eat you. I'm going to eat you. And they're all scared and they're like, ah. And then this like one little minion is like, hey guys, turn around with me. And then they all turn around and then the minions are like 3 times bigger than the shark. And the shark's like, ah. So like if we imagine the shark being the system that we all feel somewhat powerless to, the systems of inequality, harm, oppression, extraction, and dehumanization and anthropocentric form of living, which focuses on the human well-being above the well-being of all of life, there is an element where we have to come together. And so in that story, I also see a very important hermetic principle, which is the law of paradox. And for the evolution of human consciousness, I think it's going to take us being able to hold the yes and both. So coming back to what you were saying about all these different perspectives, right? So duality is more than like a spiritual lineage or a teaching. It's a philosophy of understanding life. Duality being inevitability in some way from both the Vedic traditions and the Buddhist traditions that see good can only exist because evil exists. And heat, we can only know heat from cold. We can only know happiness because we've experienced sadness. For life to exist, we have male and female bodies uniting to give birth. So this is the kind of inevitable structure of like in life, there is duality. And there's this question, this inquiry, right? Can we actually get out of that? Like in the fight for a better world, right? Are we trying to escape duality? And so the other side of that principle is, well, there's a non-dual nature to life. And a lot of us here in festivals like this have at least touched upon or oriented ourselves somewhat towards the we are all one, I would say, pillar of perception in the world, of like an interconnectedness. And what would it be like if we lived like that? But there's an issue when we have like a split between these two perceptions. And the yes and both mentality is able to hold both the realization that like, I am Ebyän, I have a body, I have a certain makeup and story, and I'm also part of this greater body that we are linked by, and we can also see that as reflections of each other in the celebration of the diversity of life. And so just to bring this into more of a tangible form, there's a genocide happening right now. And it's not the first time it's happened. It's happening in several places all at once. But I'm going to speak about one central locus point and focus right now, which is Palestine, as almost a symbolic orientation of our world towards the struggle of both, the harm of colonization, of supremacy, but also the legacy of oppression as the state of Israel has formed because of the oppression that was experienced by the Jewish people even long before the Holocaust, the displacement and marginalization of the Jewish people, which creates an ancestral pain body of fear and trauma that now has led us also to where we are in this movement of liberation that has been going on for 75 years. It didn't start 9 months ago when this conversation became known in the, let's say, public or mainstream eye. There is people who genuinely have a care for the world in some way and believe in non-duality. We are all one. Who believe that the way to take a stand is to say, we are all one. There's all unity. Let's be friends. There's no bad guys. Let's come together. There's been suffering on both sides. This is the both sides argument, let's say. And so there's an element to this where I think that we can tie ourselves up in knots when we are only in the mind and in debate and in logic. But when we drop down into a felt sense and we see the images and we see the evidence and we pay attention, first without any ideas, but just coming and literally paying attention, the felt sense doesn't lie to us. And so, can we all be one? Can we acknowledge non-duality and still live in duality by taking a stand for something? And so in that case, for me, taking a stand for marginalized people, that solidarity is also a key element of, because it's easy for me to stand up for marginalized communities or demographics that I represent or that are like my people, my being, rather than that person over there who I don't really have a relation with or a connection with in my own composition. And so to me, this is an example of bridging non-duality and duality. The last thing that I'll say about that is I also believe in this paradoxical way of holding both. It means, can I not dehumanize those who are doing the dehumanizing? And in that way, I can still take a stand without becoming part of the same problem that created this mess.
Thank you for tuning in. If you are enjoying this episode, do join our membership. For a small contribution, you can be part of our community, where we deepen the conversation and offer spaces of learning and embodiment. As a member, you are a patron supporting the making of this show, keeping the episodes full length, free and accessible for all. And you receive a number of benefits, such as monthly soul space, going deeper sessions, access to our library of workshops, and discounts on all our online and in-person experiences. Our membership is what makes us able to make this show and stay advertising free in a world that is always trying to sell us stuff we don't need. Head to allthatweare.org/membership to find out more and join today.
So the simple thing that came to me was just, as you said, not to dehumanize those that are creating the destruction. And it's as simple as a lack of love. And so I was part of this speak about the collective, the power that we have individually, I think Nathaniel was saying, and that we have as a collective that I think we're just discovering, and this new humanity movement of change that is occurring, whether we are very aware of it or not, it's happening. And in that, I was a part of groups that were doing meditations at the time to send love to Trump and to Putin. And it was super powerful. It was really, really amazing. And actually, there was a point where it was a big group. It was very strong. And there was a ceasefire a couple of days later. And I think tapping into that for me is in the background of my mission on this earth. I'd really like to bring that together more. I did a study of the nature mystic Pacos, like the shamans of Andean Peru. And they are very clear there won't be any longer a messiah or an individual, because it's a collective loop, and the power of us coming together to do energetic work as well. I know groups that are going to, like in Japan, what was it called? The with the nuclear place, I can't remember now. Fukushima, yeah, thank you. To bring down the charge of the toxins that had come out of there. And they've also gone to Auschwitz and bring down the heaviness of the charge there. This is the kind of work that I think as a new humanity we can do. And as I said, just the simplicity of love that can change anything and everything in so many ways. And just the example that comes up is a child being under a car and a mother who normally doesn't lift so many heavy things, being able to lift a car to get her child out. So this is where I feel it's simplistic, and yet it's super powerful.
Those of you who may be familiar with my work know that I'm mushroom biased, and I do really feel that mushrooms are here to help heal, for lack of a better word, the world. there was a post that came out the other day with one of my quotes, and it was along the lines of, America, along with other parts of the world, are turning to shit. So who better than the mushrooms to pop up in these days and times to support with the converting of this negative energy, so to speak, into something positive, because that's what they do. So interesting, you mentioned Fukushima, that's what, some research has been done to suggest that mushrooms can take those toxins out from the atmosphere, from the soil. There's evidence to suggest that they can all, because we come from the soil, as I always make reference to that. So then therefore the mushrooms can do the work with us too. And I'm yet to read it, but somebody sent me an article just yesterday, with the events post October the 7th, that obviously being at an environment where people were partaking in substances, and post these events, that there's a high number of people who've been partaking in mushrooms and being able to deal with their challenges. And I'm saying all this just to say that within the change that we can actually make based on some of the research that I'm sharing with folks, is that if we focus on what we want, not what we don't want, on what we want, we can shift our genes. People are familiar with epigenetics and how we pass on trauma and our fears, and for some reason or another, that does seem to be the focus. I had a conversation just earlier on, just before coming in here, just on the basis of those principles needed to be applied in the here and now. So I'm saying all that just to say that the science also suggests if you eat mushrooms, you can change your genes and the genetics inside of you, which are your ancestors. And moving forward, you can create realities that you want. But if we stay in a place and space where we focus on what we don't want, if everybody remembers when The Secret was the thing and the law of attraction, you mentioned the Hermetic principles, it teaches you, or shares at least, that you need to focus on what you want to manifest. So for me, this is just where we can start really shifting the dynamics, utilizing the technology, the organic technology being the mushrooms, our consciousness, which is the hard drive or the motherboard that's connected to the real source, Earth, Mother Nature, that can actually just start making these shifts take place. And I feel like the world will be a better place if we just all start eating mushrooms. And I say that and wrap it up by just saying another group that I shared the research on, dealing with the Khoisan people, the so-called Bushmen of South Africa. They have a healing modality where they dance and they get into a trance state and can shift energy. They can shift a dis-ease. Dis-ease or disease is a deity, a jinn, a demon. You can shift and exercise these things. So no difference to you saying people meditating, praying, or sending energy towards Trump or anybody. It's like, this is really real. But this goes back to the earlier point of getting in where you fit in. That's not for everybody. But if you know that that's what you do, like that's what you need to be doing. So these so-called Bushmen of South Africa, when they dose up and get into this trance, they dance. And we're at a festival where there's a lot of dancing that should be taking place. And if you dance with intention, you can heal yourself and shift your genes, shift your consciousness, and there's a butterfly effect. And what they teach in the community is that, in fact, not everybody needs to dance. Not everybody needs to know the dance. But if you know the dance and you know you need to dance, you better get up and start dancing. Because when you start dancing, there's a butterfly effect, and you can just start healing your family, the community, and the rest of the world. So I'll share that one.
Thank you. I just wanted to connect it with what you were saying, Ebyän, about non-duality and duality, and how to get there. And so the simplistic, coming back to the love, is about us coming from our minds down into our hearts, right, and living from a place of love rather than fear. And this is the movement that I see that's part of the shift in consciousness that we're going through. And yes, with the help of mushrooms and other types of medicines, and for everyone it can be something different. I just remembered being at a fundraiser in a church in London, and I was it was busy, things were going on, and I went off to see a patchwork quilt that was framed and to have a good look at it. And it was, I had different words in it and different sections of like hope and faith and truth and love and these things. And in a little corner it said, put MDMA in the water. And I was like this. Has everyone, have you seen this? I don't know where that photo is. I wish I could find it. But there you are, these plants that are also speaking to us from the earth. That's there's the consciousness of, we call it Sophia, which I'm not going to get into here, but that's awakening, the feminine, the divine feminine that's awakening, and these plants that are speaking to us and bringing us most, more into our hearts are part of that healing. But just going back to what I was saying, holding the people, the destroyers, even of individual situations of people who have caused us pain, eventually to be able to come to a place of forgiveness, obviously is helpful to us, it frees us. But it's that compassion that is the highest level of love. And the more that that can emerge from within us, the more healing and the more we can come to a non-duality and to the oneness. Yeah.
When we think of like the changes that we need to make and us being the change, or this theme of we are change, it can seem like that's something to do, like that's about taking action or doing something differently, or we can externalize it. And actually, I think what you're both talking to is like the change starts in us. It's like the change is coming from the inside out. And the change is coming from us understanding ourselves and finding peace in ourselves, and through doing that, being able to find compassion for other people, even though we might disagree with them or we might really hate what they're doing in the world or to us directly, but seeing that they're doing that from their place of pain or loss or struggle, And so I see that the more that we can connect to ourselves and understand ourselves more deeply, that is the real change, actually. Because when we do that, like I can see, I've got a vision of the world at some point in the future where everyone, let's say the next generation of children, aren't born into all this toxic thinking and ideologies that a lot of us have been exposed to, but they come from a place of peace and grounding and acceptance. And when that happens on a broad scale, the world will change. The world will change. And all these other external problems, these systemic failures, all these other things, they'll change naturally as a result of the change that's happening in us. So actually, for me, the change starts in here, actually. And I think that's the one thing that, in a way, it's the only thing that we really have any full control over. It's the only thing. If that's all you do is take responsibility for you finding peace in you and living as an expression of that in the world, something's going to happen. Change is going to happen.
So the question I would like to offer, if it feels good to everybody, is just, we're at a festival. Obviously, substances will be involved in these spaces. Darren brought up the mushrooms as sacred allies and also as part of our greater body and our ancestors. And so one of the also like greats in the legends of the entheogenic, I'll call it, rather than psychedelic, entheogenic being God facilitating or bringing us closer to God within first and foremost, right? So the entheogenic movement is Terence McKenna, and he had this one quote that really like shifted my life and a lot of the like moments I would try to talk to my family about these things. And he said, in modern and Western society, we have like an obsession about independence. And so, people are like, oh yeah, I want to reach these enlightened states of awareness without having to take anything inside of me. And yet he was like, well, how do you breathe? Do you not breathe oxygen from the trees? Don't you need the trees to breathe? And so why is there anything wrong from also the like beautiful dependency? It's also an intimacy in a way. It's like the interwoven nature of life, just like we would, waste away if we didn't have the nourishment of the basics of air and of water, etc. And so I would consider that the entheogens, the sacred allies of our time to help usher forward human consciousness, as part of the revolution and a way of change. And I'm curious what the panel has to say about how we can do so in non-hedonistic ways. And when I say hedonistic, I mean escapism. I don't mean that we can't access joy and we can't access celebration, right? But let's say if one form is hedonistic, where it's a superficial form of communing with some of these allies, and the other being consciousness expanding forms. And so what are your views around this, the ways to engage with them in consciousness expanding forms rather than superficial forms?
Yeah, I'd like to jump in there because I'm feeling that. And because just prior to you sharing that, I was thinking, like, what's been missing in the communities that I've worked with is a rites of passage. And this is why we're out here and we don't know who we are, where we're going, what's going on. And as I say, we wait till our backs up against the wall in a midlife crisis before we start to ponder these things. But we should have been introduced and addressing these things from childhood. So there's a rites of passage in most indigenous cultures around the world into building this relationship with fungi and other, plant allies. But then we move to the West, or, some of us are displaced, kidnapped, taken. But we're in places like Noisily, where this is a rites of passage for many people. There's many groups that I've sit down with and I'll be like, so where did you have your first entheogenic or psychedelic experience? And like, at a festival. And then I realized how powerful these potentially places are for people to activate those archetypes that lay dormant in the same way that we would do it in an indigenous rites of passage, that is in celebratory, in dancing, in nature, in the woods. All of the key elements are here for us actually to facilitate that shift and change. But the key component is like intentions. So people say, we shouldn't, take psychedelics recreationally, and I'm like, like I said, I say get in where you fit in. If you feel you need to go to a festival and you dose up and that's how you enjoy it, like, why not? Like, just put it in the water. However we get it is how we get it. It's like everybody has to play their part. I think it's really important to know that, just like, what is the intention behind it? And then rather than us hating on people or pointing to things like, we shouldn't do this recreationally, or people say, it's wrecking creation and, all these fancy slogans and terms, I'm thinking like, these are like the perfect places and spaces to actually activate that. So a lot of times in my community, there's folks who be like, yo, Darren, why are you at all these festivals, man, with all these other people that's doing, like, we could be more proactive and be doing it this way. And I'm like, either or, whatever your perspective is, you need to be in the places and spaces even where you think it's not happening. Like, and that's even the places, more importantly, to be, rather than preaching to the choir all day, every day, you need to bring that spirit, that energy into places and spaces where it may not actually be at. So for me, it's at festivals. But when you watch it on the TV and you see, traditional Glastonbury festival, people rolling in the mud, stripping naked and, doing whatever, it's like, no, that's actually it. Being in nature, stripping naked, hugging the trees, because I see that in indigenous cultures, that's what they do. But what is the intent? What is the intention behind it? And I think that's just what's lacking. And because we don't have the rites of passages in place, like, you're just going to learn from Frank or Trippy Ricky from Rotherham. He's going to be the one who shows you the rites of passage. But we used to have elders who had the knowledge and wisdom of, to share and impart with the young people. And I'm out here just like everybody else, just trying to work it out. But I've seen those principles in all of these places and spaces where, where we do this. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's all about intention, and it's about making a conscious decision of how to engage with that kind of thing. I'm going to share a short version of a really uncomfortable story, but I think it's really important. 18 months ago, one of my sisters took her own life. She'd been struggling for a while, but I didn't see that coming. And it's the worst thing that's ever happened to me by a very long way, and it completely floored me. And I spent a week smoking myself into oblivion and drinking myself into oblivion in some vain attempt to try and manage the shock and the grief and the emotion and everything. And I got to the end of that week and I felt like I was dying. Like, my body was just saying, stop doing this. A 7-day hangover is not a nice thing. And it wasn't helping me emotionally either. It's like numbing it, but then you wake up the next day and it's even worse. And so you keep going. And I got to the end of that week and I was like, this is not the way to deal with this. And I went sober for many months after that. But before I did that, I went and did a psychedelic journey with a friend of mine. And I went and did a mega dose of mushrooms. And I did that with a very clear intention, because I knew it wasn't going to be fun. I wasn't doing it for fun. I was doing it because I knew that it would help me in some way to deal with whatever the hell was going on in me. So it was very intentional. We had created the space for it. I had like several days for it. Turned my phone off. I was like, I just need to disconnect from my life for a bit to try and deal with this thing. And that's what I did. And it was absolutely horrendous. It was a horrible, horrible, horrible experience. And I was literally in a little pile on the floor. I couldn't talk. I couldn't move. I was just in a world of pain for several hours. And I was ready for that. You know, I knew that was coming, or I knew something like that was coming. So I met it willingly. And it really helped me. It really, really, really helped me. And I came out of that several hours later. And it was kind of like every thought that I needed to have, every question that I needed to ask, and there were many. And many of them, don't, you know, they just don't have answers. But everything that needed to come up came up. And it was like years of therapy in 6 hours, you know. And I came out of that, and don't get me wrong, it's not like it sorted me out. I was still in a very dark place for several months after that. But it helped me a lot. It really, really helped me. And it helped to kind of take some of the weight off it. That was definitely not a hedonistic experience. I wasn't doing that for fun. I was doing that because I knew that it would be a good thing to do. And I've done that several times since then, especially when I've been in the depths of grief. But I think it comes back to intention. It came back to going, what do I want from this? Why am I doing this? What is this for? Making peace with whatever was going to come, being open to whatever was going to come, and just submitting to something more powerful than me and just allowing it to happen, you know? And that was it. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Nathaniel. So I think we can all agree, because that's exactly what I was going to say as well. I think it comes back to intent. And I had a really interesting experience last night where, having worked 12 years now with one particular indigenous group of the Western Amazon, the Yawanawa, and in their tradition, always in ceremony with the sacred medicines of the forest, somewhere in you know, from hearing that people could use ayahuasca recreationally, for me it was just like I couldn't ever imagine that. It's so foreign to the way it's come into my life and how we partake in it and collectively as well. And then this Changa and DMT, which, you know, I've heard of an indigenous group in Australia that stopped the movement of DMT being posted out of Australia with the acacia tree, and the importance for them, you know, the connection of the spirit of the tree and all of these things. But last night I met two different people who thankfully changed my perspective. And with both stories, it was about intent and what came for them in working with ketamine, which is something I've never tried before. And the other one was DMT, I think. Yeah, and in festival environments, the magic that can happen and the shifting, and just felt it opened me to that aspect and to what I think we're experiencing as a psychedelic renaissance that's being called, but the revolution that psychedelics are bringing as well. Thank goodness for that. Just hallelujah. That's all I can say to that.
I have to jump in here as the host of this conversation and say, please don't put anything in anyone's water, because I've seen actually really horrific things that can happen when people are with powerful substances without the right set and setting, without the right people around them. People have different kinds of sensitivities, and there are entities. There's all kinds of other factors that we don't really understand because we haven't had that cultural training with elders of the land that understand the medicines and the plants and the fruits of the mycelium and all of the different ways that they can interact with different things. And so I do want to say, like, be cautious in your explorations and find good people that can support you, that can be with you. We have the whole team here from PsyCare, and they do such beautiful work at festivals, and they will tell you that it doesn't always turn out happy, and that can be with someone for a while. And it is important to say that bit, because yes, we can meet God, but we can also meet the devil and everything else in between. And so really, really knowing that's all possible. And I feel like it really then comes back to, what is the intention? Where is the respect? Like, what is the ritual around the honoring in order to really connect in at the the space that's really right for you in terms of what you take and the dose, and also like how and who with and where, and like people have different kinds of sensitivities and all of it. And I feel like it's really important to understand all of that. And I loved what Darren shared this morning, which is that we talk here in like dominant Western culture about a psychedelic renaissance, but actually in many cultures across the world, like this is just a way of life, that we actually have that deeper relationship and we understand and we live in reverence and we live in connection, and it is part of our collective way of being that the plants and the mushrooms and the spirits and the ancestors are all present and just as important as humans. And the other thing I want to say is that we are also just in who we are. Like, we're so incredible as human beings, and we have such an ability to shift energy wherever we are. I'm sure you've experienced that thing of you meet someone, you're in their presence, you hug someone, and it just completely changes your state of being. And that comes through from their authenticity, from what they've cultivated in themselves, from the relationship that they have with their ancestors and plants and beings. And so we also have this possibility to create change in like every tiny moment of our lives, just in our energy. And you know, we all have like flat moments and bad days, and we feel stressed, and sometimes, you know, we're hungry or we need the toilet and we haven't got that space and availability in that moment. But that is all part of it, that we can tap into these spaces within ourselves, and that we can open that within each other, and then we can create more and more and more of that. And it's a really fun thing to play when you're out and about, especially today, in today's world, where, you know, the people that work in supermarkets don't even get to do the till and be like, you know, everyone's just looking at their phones and all of that stuff. And so I feel like one way that we can really bring a lot of change into the world is to not be the people looking at our phones, and to be the people that are being present. So I'm going to invite each of you to share something of a closing on this theme that you'd love to leave everyone here with. And also please do share how people can connect with you afterwards.
I'd just like to reflect on this, again, back to the non-duality, duality, the oneness, and connecting back to the studies with the nature mystics of the Q'ero people of Andean Peru. This concept of God and devil, or negative and positive. And the way they see it is that is either heavier energy or lighter energy. And as we are part of this big movement of shift and change within ourselves, and what we see outside of ourselves, and what we can be part of in our circles, in our communities, in our families, with ourselves, the self-knowledge of ourselves, and this emergence that comes from hopefully moving more from the mind into the heart within ourselves, forgiveness and compassion for ourselves, for our families and our communities, and outwards, that we connect into the strength of, as Ebyän said, that is within the connection of the earth, and that we are part of one organism, actually. And this, for me, just remembering that in itself is big, because a lot of the time I felt there's that separatism of we are on our own, right? And when we look at the organism of the earth, and that we're all part of this, the air, the waters, the fire, everything is within us and without us and outside of us, to constantly come back to that, to our essence, to who we are, which is sons and daughters of the earth, and in constant change.
Thank you. And I'm just going to echo with the same message that I've been sharing by way of the mushrooms. We're going to make real shift and changes if we actually realize that we are mushrooms having a human experience. I always say, if we start bringing mushrooms into the conversation, bring mushrooms into your meetings, into your dialogue, we will start making more holistic, sustainable decisions in life. This is the organism that is holding this all together. I always say she is the mother the matrix, the matter, the material that hugs this big piece of shit together. And if she was to ever relinquish her embrace, it would all turn to diarrhea. It's really important in these last days and times, before the true OG mushroom gods come back and turn this substrate, planet Earth, into a compost heap, we can actually, as its ally and support and ancestral fruit, her children, we can actually start making better decisions. So I'm just here to let you know that if you realize you're a mushroom having a human experience, that's really cool. If you think that's a whole lot of BS, then you need to start role-playing. I would say, where are the role players at? There you go. I need to go back to California. Loads of role players there. Once you start role playing your true mushroom self and activating that archetype inside of you, you will start making more wiser decisions and changes in your personal life, which then has the butterfly effect. That's all I have to share today. Peace and love.
I think if I can leave you with anything, it's to remind you that whatever the change is that you seek and that you want, it all starts inside you. And that the more that you can slow down, really slow down your life, slow down your chattering mind, and look inwards for the answers, find some peace. And like you said, realize that we are part of something way bigger, that we're connected to something way bigger. I was always wary to use the S word, but that we are spiritual beings. I had a lot of problems with that word for a long time because I was associated with religion, but that there's something to us that's beyond our story and our ego and our culture and our language and the habits that we've picked up along the way that we didn't have any choosing in. We just happened to be born in the time and place that we're born into, and that gives us whatever perspective we've got. But there's something way deeper than that, and that unifies us. And what I've seen in my life and what I've seen with many hundreds of people that I work with now is the closer you can get to that and the more connected you are to that and the more you look in for the answers, that's where you're going to find peace, and that's where you're going to know what to do, and that's where you're going to be able to start to be whatever change that you want to see in the world. So look in, not out. You've already got what you need.
I love that the S word. It's become like a dirty word, but it's not. Yeah, if I really listen, I don't have much else to say, but two things come to me. And the first is, whatever you already know, whatever small or massive awakenings have touched you in your life, don't go back to sleep. And while you do that, enjoy the process, the journey of wherever we are right now at the point close to collapse, most likely, of this current state. To know that joy is part of the resistance, even with everything being as it is. And so that's all. Don't go back to sleep and enjoy yourself in the process.
Thank you so much to all of you for listening and being so present and attentive. I hope that there's more ways that we can connect and share and continue this journey of changing and transforming and living and growing together. And a huge thank you to Jimena and Darren and Nathaniel and Ebyän for everything that you've shared and that you've brought here. You can stay connected and find out more about, we share the podcast and on All That We Are and links to everyone at allthatweare.org.
Big up Amisha as well. Thank you for hosting us. Yeah.
Thank you for listening. We hope that you have enjoyed this episode and it has sparked some inspiration and creativity in you. As always, you can find links to everything we mention in this episode, download our book, and discover so much more over on allthatweare.org. We give space to our guests to share their perspective without debating it or fact-checking, as this approach allows for deep, unedited conversations from the heart. We trust your discernment and wisdom to take what is useful and challenge what isn't in your own understanding. We offer spaces for discussion and integration in our membership community, which we would love for you to join. We don't believe in selling you things you don't need through this podcast, and so it's made possible by you, our beautiful community. If you loved this and would like to connect more deeply with us, please join our membership. You choose what you contribute based on our sliding scale, and you become a patron whose support makes this podcast happen, as well as receiving access to a library of many resources and invitations to nourishing events. Please also hit subscribe and leave us a review wherever you listen so others can find us. This podcast is made by an all-female global team. Me, Amisha Gadiali, producer and host, Anna Greta Folderbach, who crafts the words that accompany each episode, and Mary Chan, who edits the sound so skillfully. All That We Are celebrates all that we are already and the untapped potential that lives inside us. It invites the full power of the more than human world, nature, the unseen, our ancestors and our future generations. It reminds us that we never exist in silo, through borders, timelines, or polarity, that in each and every moment, all that we are is here.